Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, Capital Markets Analyst and host of your Cannabis Business Podcast. Today we've got Steve Cominski. He's with Baked and Awake Podcast. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on this morning, Josh. Good to be here with you, brother. Are we puffing?
Yeah.
It's like the closest thing to a session we can have these days because you can't hang out with the homies and pass one around. So
I know. Have you seen the whole thing with, pre-rolls just kind of getting annihilated?
Oh, interesting, because people aren't sharing them, so everybody's got to carry their own, huh?
Yeah, I always thought that pre-rolls were more of a convenience factor, right? It's easy to go in, you grab it, and you run out. But if you're not going to the store regularly, I don't know, maybe it's that. Maybe it's the fear of combusting, burning and having lung issues with this virus. Maybe it's the fact that most people would puff, pass. I don't know, man, but it's white women 50 and over were the number one demographic buying pre-rolls. Maybe they're not going to the store. Either way, the sales numbers for pre-rolls are getting annihilated. It's interesting.
Oh, they went down.
Yeah,
I could think of a
dramatically.
few
I mean,
reasons.
in some cases only 2%, but in other, you look at in Vegas and everything is just getting decimated down there. But,
interesting. I could think of a few reasons why that might be the case. I mean, if you're, it's a really good portable form factor for, in between work and socializing and in between socializing and home or out with friends, etc. But if I'm looking at a lockdown and I need flower to smoke while I'm on lockdown, I have time to roll. I can roll, pinners if I need to economize, or I can roll fatties if I'm feeling flush anyway. And I might want to just get like a half ounce at a time or something at the store and just have that so I don't have to go down every 2 or 3 days. Because you're ordering online half the time. Almost most of the stores are ordering, Evergreen Market is all online orders only. Just here in my neighborhood. I think Have a Heart's still letting you go into the store just with social distancing and not really calling ahead. But, that's just my part of town, a couple of the closest shops to me. But interesting. Do you know?
Surprised they're even allowing you to go into the store without pre-ordering, because most of the stores are making it mandatory to pre-order.
As of a few days ago, that was the text I got from Have a Heart with their, how if you sign up for their different loyalty programs or whatever, some of these shops will text you specials, etc. So as of a few days ago, they were still letting people in the store.
What are some of those specials? Because I've seen from Uncle Ike's text, and Uncle Ike's is like the Washington low discount store. What I've been seeing is ounces for 30 to 55% off, depending on the day and the brand.
Right.
But a lot of people
I'm peeking. I'm looking down here because trying to find one of the messages from like Have a Heart or whoever. Evergreen had like some sales on 20 to 40% off select items, and you had to find them on the menu on a treasure hunt. So kind of a little bit of a hit or miss thing there. Just and none of the stuff that I wanted, namely concentrates or CBD tincture, in neither category when I looked that particular day. I'm thinking a few days back here now on Sunday, did I see anything that ended up being a discount for me? As a matter of fact, I kind of overpaid slightly yesterday for some concentrates just so I could have some dabs in the house again. So I do notice from just a couple of weeks ago, whereas Evergreen had tons of slab mechanics and 2 or 3 other options in at the like sub $30 per gram level, $25 a gram, and in some cases like 20 or 21 bucks a gram. I paid $35 yesterday for, something nice, something nicer, Pura Vida. I don't know. You probably know these guys better than I do.
I haven't seen that brand. No.
Nice looking.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Some rocks,
Nice.
All right, we'll just dab that chunk. That's okay. That fell out right there. But yeah, man, I haven't paid $35 for a gram of concentrates in a while. But of course, this is kind of uptown right here. Even for me, I usually just get some, turp sauce or something like that, some sugar.
Yeah, I kind of followed the masses with bulk buying myself. So a few weeks back, I bought 3 1-gram vape carts and then an ounce. So I wasn't really smoking that ounce, just kind of, hoarding it, storing it.
Yeah, it was literally like your battery pack of auxiliary backup weed.
Yeah, I mean, if it's essential business today, it could be closed tomorrow, and so rather than risk that from happening, I wanted to store it. And also 420 is coming up. And so there's going to be some really good deals. So I'm trying to not have too much on hand before the discounts hit.
There you go. Right. Right. Because then you'll look at your stash and you're already loaded for bear. What you got there? I think there you go. These virtual backgrounds are cool though, except for that kind of little glitch that we got to work around. Yep.
So I've got a little bit left of this. I bought this cart, with a discount. So I think it was only like $25 a gram.
Right.
So Cannabis is the producer. I forget the name of the processor. I probably wouldn't name them anyways, because after posting this on Cannabis' LinkedIn page, the CEO of Cannabis was posting something, and I said, I've got this pink Skittles, 89% THC. And he had direct messaged me, sent me a DM, and was like, "Can you delete that? I don't remember selling any flower to that processor in Washington." So I got on the phone with him, and I showed him the packaging front and back, and he went into his log, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I sold that to him 2 years ago." And so I was wondering why this sativa, pink Skittles, was hitting me behind the eyes like an indica, just like it was not euphoric, not energetic, not uplifting. This was like an indica.
That sheds some light on that, though, doesn't it? Because that time in storage, time on the shelf will do that,
right? And so
CBG and CBN now.
Boom. Yeah, so that CBN is from degraded cannabis, right? So that's going to give you, what is it? Is it what is a terpene that it converts to? I want to say melanine. That's not right.
Or melatonin, the sleepy kind of thing.
I think that's where I'm getting tripped up at.
Right, melanin, melatonin. They sound a lot alike. Myrcene.
Myrcene.
There it is.
That's the lethargic kind of couch
that's
lock.
The terpene.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we're all on the same page with the effects, but the myrcene terpene, I think, is what that converts to with CBN. And it looks almost like Agent Orange, the strain, where it's kind of an orangey tint to it. So light degradation or just aging, that CBN is crucial. And so, obviously this processor turned this 2-year-old flower into oil, claiming that it was still a sativa. Not even close. So.
Wow.
Back. I mean, $25 a gram, would you expect, right? At least it's not clogging. At least it still works. So I'm able to hit this.
Sure. I mean, like, that's the thing. It's not that the stuff doesn't still have some value, but it's a matter of forthrightness in the industry, It's tough, though, because as that processor, they bought that however long ago they bought it. And there's a reason why it hasn't made it to market on the shelf right until right now. And there's a story probably attached to that would be very interesting to hear from them in terms of how they've weathered the last couple of years and why that stock that's still that old is still finding its way out into the shelves today. Doesn't mean it's unsafe. Doesn't mean you're not getting stoned in some form, right? But it's still interesting to me. And you'd like to think that we're getting fresher stuff than that most of the time, no matter what segment, whether it's flower, edibles. CBD.
Yeah, there's not really anything like it. It's not like you're buying a soda that's stale or flat, that doesn't have a fizz. It would almost be buying, a Twinkie, and then, when you're ready to eat it, it's pasta, something totally different that you weren't expecting. It went from sweet to savory, and you're like, whoa, sativa, now an indica? That is not what I wanted.
I just muted myself because of my torch here real quick, Josh.
It's all good, man. Blaze that up. I
wanted to just smoke a bowl, but I can't find my lighter, so it's dabs.
Dab it is. Yeah. I wanted to talk to you about a few things, get your take on the potential for national legalization in the U.S. Maybe this virus will speed things up. With the Cannabis Business Podcast, we're kind of looking at things through the lens of finance. And so if The government needs revenue to pay for that 1.5 trillion they gave the bankers for the repo markets, or the 2 trillion they're going to give to corporate America, while they fight over the $1,200 they want to lend us. I'm just wondering what your take is. So we'll dive into the potential for legalization as things move on. But one story I wanted to pick your brain about was Long John Silver's. So there's a cornbread mafia in Kentucky. And
Right.
so when a lot of these guys came back from Vietnam, Kentucky bluegrass, the cannabis strain, was doing really well. They saw the profitability. And so a lot of these guys kind of just decided we're gonna grow. It was a misdemeanor to grow cannabis at that time. In the early 70s. And so a lot of these guys jumped on board and started growing some cannabis, and then needed to distribute it. And they ended up being successful enough where they needed to launder their money. So that's when Long John Silver's, the seafood company, comes in. And taking a step back, there's a lot of zombie companies out there, companies that need to take on debt in order to stay open. So this whole recession that we're about to see is probably good for the overall economy to get some of those companies out of the way. Even in cannabis, there's altruistic people that haven't paid themselves a salary in a long time. So with those people probably out of the way, not coming back, that's going to create this fourth quarter pop where a lot of sales from existing companies that are still around, they're going to do better with these people kind of getting out of the way second, third quarter. But the zombie companies that have to take on debt in order to stay open, they're gone too. But what it did provide this cornbread mafia was an opportunity to get into Long John's and then start funneling some money. So I know that on Netflix, Ozarks is really popular.
Right.
So
I haven't watched it yet, but you can't avoid the previews for it. And I know it's been like really up there in terms of watched shows lately. I like Jason Bateman, so I like
Jason Bateman is great.
Right,
And
right.
Ozark is dark, dark as fuck, but it's good. It's kind of funny. It's this accountant who ends up getting involved with a Mexican cartel to launder money. So he goes to the Ozarks, buys a casino, and then tries to launder money. So it's a pretty interesting story. But same thing with the cornbread mafia, right? They end up using this Long John Silver's as a way to launder some money. And so I just think that's a fascinating story.
Now when I tried to look into this, so far I've found a Reddit thread about it and a really weird, like fringy looking blog talking about it. Is this for sure a real story that this went down with Long John Silver's in this part of the country?
Yeah, there was a documentary.
And is this like at the corporate level or just like a franchisee of some kind?
So
I could easily see it being a franchisee, you know what I mean?
Right.
But I could also just as easily see it, and especially in the case of somebody like a Long John's, it being at the corporate level. Like I wouldn't put it past anybody, but I really wouldn't put it past a chain like them, because we all know how kind of dusty and neglected those restaurants are, if they still exist, wherever you see them. They're always in some like busted ass looking parking lot that's got weeds growing up between the parking spots where they haven't been painted in a decade, the stripes, anything like that. So
there's been a huge shift too, just in the way that we eat food. So I mean, when you think about getting seafood in the Midwest through a fast food joint, I mean, that's just like a no type of situation. So I think,
whereas once upon a time that would have been just great and would have been really popular. Up here in the Northwest, we know Long John Silver's takes a big back seat to local great Ivors, for example, and any number of other like Duke's and Elliott Bay, the restaurant down there on the water, what have you. So there's it's a tough market for old Long Johns up in the Pacific Northwest, let's say that. Very wild though that they should have. So what was the extent of it? Like, I heard it was millions, right? Is that right?
Yeah, it was the biggest pot bust in history at the time when they finally found the head of the Cornbread Mafia. So I haven't watched the documentary. It came out in 2019, and I haven't actually found the actual documentary. I've just found a video on YouTube about one of the authors. So it was a book. Then the author ended up talking for about a little over an hour about it. I haven't listened
Was
to
it
it.
the
Haven't
one
had
they
time.
did called Murder Mountain?
That was totally different. That was a Netflix one about the Emerald Triangle and the dangers of
Humboldt,
cannabis.
the trimmers, the harvesters. Yes.
Yeah. I haven't seen it. Have you watched that one?
Yeah, but it's been a minute. I should rewatch that, actually.
Yeah. But to answer your question earlier, I think
Mhm.
that it's probably more of a franchise thing. Now I'm totally guessing
Okay.
because I haven't watched the documentary, but I'm guessing that it's probably a franchise thing. But it would be hard for anybody in that C-suite position at corporate to not know what was going on, because you have underlying trends. So whoever wasn't a franchise owner outside of that Kentucky region, you would obviously see massive differences. Someone laundering money through one restaurant claiming,
would be more successful than they should be, seemingly.
yeah, if you got $200,000 in daily sales from fast food, seafood, while a guy 20 miles down the street has got, $5,000 on a weekend, that's going to be a red flag. Right. So eventually they got caught. I don't know how or when, but just the whole concept of a fast food chain, there's other conspiracies too about, not even conspiracy, but McDonald's. Did you hear about that whole thing?
No.
I remember growing up as a kid, looking at the Monopoly game and thinking, how is it that just one person is going to win $1 million? That's not a game of chance. That's just a game of knowing the right person. And that's exactly what it ended up happening. Is these McDonald's game pieces were being sold or auctioned off to individuals that knew the person who was in charge of delivering it to whatever region he was supposed to. Never actually made its way ever. It was being sold to people that wanted, that $1 million mark or whatever the prize was. He was selling it to the highest bidder.
Holy moly!
So
and this went on for years.
Oh
with
yeah,
the Monopoly
decades.
game. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was over 10 years, easy. It was like the 80s and 90s, and then the guy got busted, I think, relatively recently.
Unbelievable.
But yeah,
well, so we were talking about last time we were talking was via email, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about, I emailed you about, is it 2546, Washington House Bill 2546, the proposal to limit the strength of concentrates.
Oh, I forget the bill number, but yeah, limiting.
No, I think it is 2546. Thank you, by the way, for your answers to my emails on that.
Mm-hmm.
So last I checked, that's still in committee. Last I checked, that hasn't been fully defeated. You know anything about that?
My understanding from the Cannabis Alliance, the lobbyist group here based in Seattle, is that it never made its way out of committee, meaning it didn't have enough votes. So anything that doesn't have enough votes will just sit there in space and float around.
So it doesn't get kicked to the curb in some like clearly resolved way. Like, sorry, not enough. No, this didn't pass. This.
Right. Yeah. It'll just kind of sit there until either somebody forgets about it entirely or somebody brings it back up. I don't know if there's a time frame.
So it can technically still be pushed by somebody.
Yeah, definitely.
If it's in committee still. So that's what that leaves it open for them, is to save it at the last minute somehow.
Right. And there's a marijuana lounge bill that was put into place last year, and that didn't get enough votes to get out of the House, but it's still sitting there. So there could be, changes made to it and resubmitted.
Okay. Because I'm still worried about that coming back around and being a problem for everybody. But
I would plan for the unplanned. Having a concentrate at 10% would nullify the whole concentrate category,
the whole concept of concentrate.
And so I think it was a more of ignorance than maliciousness. I don't think they really intended on trying to destroy that sector. And they did the same thing to edibles. If you remember in the fall, I think it was October of 2018, they tried to make some different rules for edibles. It would have affected shapes and colors. Meanwhile, they got pink bubblegum vodka. But if you have a round edible, that shape is attracted to children. So we must stop it. So the same lobbyist group went out and told members of the House and Senate and whoever else would listen with the Liquor and Cannabis Board that this would affect 70% of the market, and that it's not a good thing and it's unnecessary, and that we'll make changes if needed, but this is not the right way to go about it. I don't know who's making these rules, but I'll tell you who I do know is impacting that THC cap limit of 10% is Have a Heart's new owner. So they're an Arizona-based company. They just bought Have a Heart for $85 million, which is interesting in and of itself because Have a Heart went out and got a $25 million friends and family round. That's how they got started. Then when they wanted to expand, get some licenses in other states, they went out and got $75 million, but they oversubscribed by $75 million. So they had to open up a Series B right after the Series A round. So that all in all, they had $175 million to play with. They went out and they bought 20 licenses or something like that in at least a dozen states and expanded really, really fast. And so that's what kind of attracted this recent M&A. But the M&A, the merger was only for, actually it wasn't even a merger. The acquisition was for 85,000. So if they had 175 million, where's that other 65 million at? Either they lost money or didn't spend it, or it's still somewhere.
Yeah. How do you even do that? That's wild.
I don't know. It's interesting. But back to the initial point of this Arizona-based company, they submitted that bill, or at least backed it, because Have a Heart is already unionized. And so actually, I'm sorry, this is an entirely different bill that came out the same time as that cap. And so this other bill would have made
There we go. I was trying to decide what possible motivation there could be for them to.
Yeah, my bad.
Now I can see them wanting to.
Yeah, already being unionized, it makes sense.
Unionization, exactly.
If you have a point system and it's based out of 100 points, and 60% of that is whether you're unionized or not, 60 points is how the scoring system is. And so there's all of these other things that you need to do in order to have your license. Otherwise, you're going to pay 150% more on employee rates. So it almost made it mandatory to unionize based on this Arizona company already buying Have a Heart that's unionized. So I guess my point to that is there's motive, right? There's people that are putting bills in place to benefit them. They would have an essential monopoly already being unionized. So back to the other bill about THC concentrates. I don't know who submitted that, but I am fairly certain it's somebody who had something to gain monetarily.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously the list of signers that did want to move the bill forward that exists, and that's easy to find by looking at the doc on the Washington State Legislature page. I actually, at the point that I was looking into it, I captured all of them. There was 14 of them at the time, and I got almost every one of their emails and got an email out to almost every one of them. I received no reply from any one of the legislators that was on that bill. And all I did was write a courteously worded inquiry into what the study that was cited in the language of the bill was, where that was, and if anybody could point me at that, because it didn't seem to be provided in an appendage or a footnote to that doc, but they mentioned it at the top of the doc in the description of the threats and dangers to public health that these concentrates posed. I believe it's a Yale study or a Harvard study that they're actually citing, but nobody will answer me on what study they're citing. So interesting, but maybe it's also they probably didn't bother to answer me because the bill perhaps wasn't going much further anyway, and they figured, well, this will all go away for the time being. Could just be that they're slow and they'll get back to me. But that was a month ago or something like that, I think, when I was talking about it at that time. So I'm looking into it, but yeah, it's a scary bill. That one was a scary bill. So
in some cases, you may not even know who authors the bill. Like my name isn't anywhere on the bill. The sponsors in the Senate and the House, they'll take credit for it. And my name will never come up anywhere unless I stand on a soapbox and let people know. which I do on the podcast.
Right.
But outside of that, nobody would have an idea that I'm involved in politics. It's not my thing.
Your bill, of course, being the marijuana lounge bill.
Right. Trying to lift that felony
Yeah.
on maintaining and operating a marijuana lounge bill in Washington. Yeah. So just like a bank has a SRO or self-regulatory organization, it's this invisible entity that writes its own legislative bills, gives it to government on behalf of banking. And they make it so complicated that the Senate and the House just say, well, that must be good because I don't understand it. So whatever, we'll just let this SRO, the self-regulatory
This sounds proper.
And so they write all of the bills, anonymously. You'd have no idea. So we don't know who's submitting this bill for a THC cap, but I guarantee you it's somebody that's going to benefit from it, obviously. It's not about the safety. I don't think, that the regulatory agency being the Liquor and Control Board, I don't think they know that THC being too high is good or bad. They don't know anything. I think that they've shown themselves time and time again to not really care or like or enjoy this industry. But I don't think they know. I guess they don't know what they're doing. I'll just say that.
It's interesting because I always tend to think that when I see something like that the people who wrote it do know what they're doing, largely. And that probably a lot of the initial sponsors also do. And that's how things gain momentum. So in cases like that, I guess a smart person would follow the money like you tend to do. So good job there as always. Now, let me ask you a question. If this isn't the most simplistic way of thinking in the world, and forgive me if it is, but I'll be that open and vulnerable right now with this thought because I just smoked. So screw it. It occurs to me that at a time like now, right now, in the midst of this quarantine and social distancing and the fact that I don't know if you're aware of this, but as of yesterday afternoon, Governor Inslee did go ahead and direct everybody to keep schools closed for the remainder of the term here in Washington State. So high schools, elementary schools, everybody's closed for the rest of the year now. And we're sitting here on April 5th or 6th. So that's
they haven't had spring break yet.
Yeah, exactly. They're on spring break right now.
Okay.
They're on spring break right now. So, but I was going to say, it occurs to me that somebody should already be, if they haven't been, writing a bill and trying to present it at the very next earliest opportunity in Olympia to legalize delivery for all recreational customers once and for all in this state. Is that naive of me to think that should be written and presented?
No, I've said it on the podcast in the last week or two. I think one of the biggest changes that we've had from a consumer behavior standpoint is online and delivery. We don't have delivery in Washington, but in California, delivery sales and Nevada have spiked. Obviously, if you don't want to leave the house if you don't have to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's going to get fast tracked. I think that because you have curbside pickup, like that's crazy. Like if you can be in a liquor store and they're just going to walk that out to you and give that to you, like I think they have drive-through liquor stores in Texas, which blow my mind because they have sober counties in Texas at the same time. So you can just drive through a barn, they hand it to you, and then you drive through on the other side. Like what?
There's some hilarious places like that you can buy your, alcohol, your tobacco, and if not your firearms, your ammunition for your firearms, all at the same drive-through down in Freedom Country down there. So they really know how to do it up when it comes to that. So
if there's any bill for cannabis that does pass, I think it's going to be delivery because you can.
So is anybody working on that you're aware of? Has this been a bill that's been in committee?
Yeah, delivery has been turned down by the LCB several times. So I don't know who's head of that committee, but I know that there are several bills from several parties that have their own interest. I know that my own headwind with the marijuana lounge bill, that rec shops wanted to be the only ones that could have that license. So again, there's going to be interested parties that get involved so that they can be the only ones that benefit.
Interesting. Well, of course, because the rec shops are feeling like the producers and processors can hold two kinds of licenses and they can only hold one.
Take Ontario, Canada, for example. There's a lot of conspiracy and hatred for the government up there because when they initiated the cannabis legalization nationwide, that you had to go in and sign up for it, right? Just like a medical card. But then all of those people got their names released, so their jobs were affected potentially, or just the anonymity was gone.
Yep.
Now all the government stores are delivery. They're the only ones. The government stores are the only ones that have delivery options. And then
so you can only get your
government weed,
national government weed from feds themselves
in Ontario. Yeah. And so that's the only way to get it right now, because Ontario made some crazy decision to say, well, you aren't essential. We're just
in Ontario, though. In Ontario.
Well, what are you going to get done in British Columbia? It's kind of a biker community up there, if you get my drift. It's that they had such slow rollouts because of the constraints with interested parties up there.
Right. The existing legacy people of interest.
The owners of the Bulldog Cafe coming in on their leather jackets and bikes. Yeah. The Hells Angels have a very tight grip.
Yeah.
British Columbia, and I would imagine even Alaska, because Alaskan weed is really, really good. Matanuska Valley, the Matanuska Thunderfuck, is a huge strain.
Right.
I drove from Valdez.
Saw a lot more of that a couple of years ago than we do these days in the local market right now.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because Matanuska Thunderfuck is a relative to Alaskan Thunderfuck, or maybe it's the same strain and they just changed the name because Matanuska is hard to say. But when I drove from Fairbanks to Valdez, I stopped through the Matanuska Valley, smoked it. And when we got to Valdez, there was a bear in the tree. So we were smoking a bowl, waiting for this bear to leave. And I got so high that I laughed and passed out. So all I remember is my girlfriend at the time and my two cousins going, Josh, are you okay? And I'm like, whoa, what happened? We were just, having a good time. I'm like, dude, you passed out. And I was like, oh, this is really good weed.
The good stuff.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I would imagine that the, Hells Angels have a grip on all of Alaskan weed. And of course, BC Bud is their toy.
Interesting. Oh my gosh. So well, luckily I think we have a little bit more of a natural market here in Washington than that, at least. Although I'm sure they're probably in our state as well at some level,
What's your take on it? Do we have a robust legacy market? I don't think much of our black market at all. When I was in college in Bellingham, we were right there at the border. And then maybe everything else came out of Cali. I mean, we got Mexican brickweed. We weren't immune to that.
Right. No, I mean, certainly we're similar age, and growing up, obviously, we were lucky to get something from what seemed to be BC. We would occasionally, in the dry time of year, August or so, end up seeing brickweed. But I feel like what happened in Washington is most of our medical players weren't the same people who ended up getting our 502 licenses. They didn't end up being the people holding the papers on the largest part of these producer processor licenses. They might be the head master grower, or they might be the subject matter in chief for this area or that area or what have you, but only a few of the top, oldest, best dispensaries in the state transitioned to I-502. And we've had a lot of turnover in license holders since 2014, 2015, when the market first opened, right? Whoever did make it in the first year or so, how many of those folks are still holding the same licenses that they were then? I would say less than 50% of those original license holders, maybe less than 60 or 70% of those original license holders.
Breaking those numbers down real quick, I think it was over 1,400 initial license holders. I think there's 800 now, but only 500 and so are active.
Yep. And those 500 that are active, again, are represented by people who have consolidated and bought and sold other licenses on their way and run several businesses, out of operation on their way to where they are now, the remaining market. So, we've been watching the effect on the marketplace since the COVID crisis has started. And you've already been tracking on what 2020 was going to look like for producers and processors who weren't part of the top 5%, 10% of licenses in the state, and what their outlook for the next year or more is. And it's not that great, because these folks have in many cases been operating at deficits or barest of profitability by any standard, especially compared to what they thought they were going to make once upon a time in the market, right? You were talking about legalization, federal legalization, potentially, coming closer than it would have for any number of reasons. Election year opportunity, the actual true opportunity here to leverage the power of the demand for the cannabis in all these nascent markets to foot the bill for a recovery, an economic recovery for the country. I think that any nationalization that takes place will clearly signal an opportunity for the complete transformation of these local cottage industries, where we're talking about interstate commerce of cannabis as well, production being able to move around the country and equalize supply. Pacific Northwest strains, Humboldt County strains can go anywhere in the country. Canada may be able to acquire and flow their flower down to us. Mexico doesn't only grow brickweed these days, probably either. And we'll find that out real quick in a future where North America is nationalized. But watch us take Canadian weed and hold the Mexicans hostage and not take their weed. You know what I mean? Or put some tariffs on that, just because that's what we do.
Well, I think we've got 33 regions that have some sort of medical or regulated cannabis market, which is an interesting number for both of our listeners.
Right, 33.
Yikes. And so with Canada being federally legal and Mexico talking about it, that's going to make a tax sandwich in the U.S. where they're going to have FOMO looking at all this tax revenue.
Yep.
And so with the majority of U.S. states already saying yes and seeing that it's an essential business, I think it's going to just be a matter of time before they try and gobble up those tax revenues, because the IRS is inundated with cash payments for taxes anyways.
Right.
And dishing out trillions of dollars in bailout money, they're going to have to look at a way to generate some revenue. So it's my thought that this is going to fast track legalization, especially if Trump is reelected. I think it's going to happen right away.
Well, then we will be talking about a very different Washington marketplace and industry very quickly after that.
Definitely.
That's for sure.
Biden is not going to, but Bernie probably would on day one, like you said.
Right.
But either way, yeah, a lot of these companies are going to consolidate. They're not going to survive this downturn. And we haven't even seen the worst of it yet. We haven't seen the supply chain disruption because everyone is just shut down. So once people are able to go back to work but can't because they don't have the supplies or parts, that's going to create another wave of a downturn. So after all of this consolidation, then we have legalization. Well, then you have Coca-Cola. So the mom and pops, if you remember Starbucks getting everyone squeezed out, when you have other people's money, you can do whatever you want. You can lower the amount of prices and open up more stores, and you should be and hemorrhage money, which is fine as long as you have increasing assets. You have some kind of metric of return.
As soon as we have federal legalization, you have craft foods getting involved. You have corporations that just can literally, without even trying, come in and without doing anything illegal, straight out compete everybody because of their endpoint distribution chains that are already in place. They simply have new products that magically appear everywhere and are advertised everywhere. And the newest of people to cannabis will be suddenly presented with their most trusted brands, giving them the cannabis that they want to experiment with. And they're like, well, by golly, if Oscar Mayer makes a CBD wiener, we're grilling those up on Saturday. I mean, that's, I don't know, but that's going to be rough to compete with for everybody, including the Marley Naturals and including the Willie's Reserves. It won't matter because those will just get bought up too. And, all those brands will be, the same as any other name brand, whether it's Marie Callender's or whoever else that, that a brand is represented by some possibly fictional or maybe once upon a time real character. But that those folks aren't really the company at all anymore. And that's what our cannabis is probably, unfortunately, gonna.
Yeah, and part of that consolidation is going to be gobbling up the big companies. So Aurora Cannabis is trading at 80 cents, which is insane. And so a lot of these companies have plummeted. So I'm going to show you this index. There's the ETF MG Alternative Harvest Index, ticker symbol MJ. So year to date, they're down 39%. PODX, which is the global cannabis ETF or exchange traded fund, that's down almost 45%. And so we've got an AI-based cannabis index. We're up 14% by comparison.
Nice.
So, looking at all of these stocks, there's going to be a takeover because people are going to see the potential or the opportunity. And so rather than invest in a new market like Massachusetts or New York, they're going to just take over Aurora Cannabis or Tilray and have a hostile takeover and buy them out. So, and it'll probably come from the Marie Callender or some firm that has a lot of market cap, but isn't really in business or struggling or whatever. And so when that consolidation happens, the legalization in the U.S. will destroy Canada. They're all expecting $1.74 per gram to break even, and the U.S. model has blown that away. And to your earlier point, you can't grow in every single state. Florida is going to have a hell of a time with powdery mildew and mold. So you're going to have regions that do really well with this dense flower and others that don't. Maybe they process it. Puerto Rico is a perfect spot for processing, take advantage of Act 20. But it's going to bring in the big players.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll continue to look to you for the indications of how quickly this is happening. That's for sure. So I don't know. Washington is interesting right now as well, though. I'm already seeing changes on the inventory of the stores. Like I said earlier,
Willie's Private Reserve took off. They're no longer in Washington.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That wasn't all the numbers will show that nobody cares outside of LA, outside of Los Angeles. Nobody cares about rappers or musicians or brands that have stars or athletes or otherwise. It's all of the numbers show that consumers don't care.
So are they literally pulling that product line out of the stores in Washington state? They've closed up shop in Washington, Willie's?
They have closed up shop. Whether they've pulled product or not, it may have been just liquidated at a discount.
Right. There may still be some out there. I probably still see some in the stores in some places. Is this in the last year? This is in the last 6 months, or?
This is in the last 45 days.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
So how can people get a hold of you? Where are you at?
You can always find me at bakedandawake.com. The podcast is simply Baked and Awake. All episodes also push to YouTube. And if you follow me on YouTube, that's kind of fun because I do videos in addition to normal podcast content. And YouTube's just fun because people can comment on stuff there, right? Podcasts are so one way. Otherwise, it feels like to me. So I really like that about YouTube. So wherever you look, Baked and Awake, you should find several results for me on the search engines. I use DuckDuckGo most of the time, not Google these days. So
state your name for the record.
Steve Cominski, aka Baked and Awake. Thanks, Josh.
That's it. I am Josh Kincaid. This is The Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out. Yeah, so are we going to get baked and talk about some awake shit or what?
I sure hope so.
So you got time to take a dab real quick?
Yeah, let's do it. I want to see delivery get legalized, Josh.
Yeah, I definitely think delivery is going to be on the table this year in Washington, 100%. It's They've seen delivery that's been popular. It's been a way to get people what they need. It's an additional business. So the Liquor and Cannabis Board, the regulatory agency here, they want to know how it's going to help small businesses. They want to know if there's a social equity program involved with it. And then they want to know if there's access for medical patients. So all three of those things meet that criteria of adding delivery to the existing business options. So it just makes sense. Like this virus thing has really just highlighted the need for that as an option. And it's silly that they didn't have it before.
So let's connect this dot, though, back to 2546. On my podcast, after I talked to you via email, I speculated that, in my mind, this would be a really great way to, if it were to pass, they would pass it with a change to it that says normal potency concentrates will still totally be allowed. It's no problem. You just need your medical card for those. And what'll also come along is it'll be 2020 or 2021, and they'll be like, and by the way, the medical registry is definitely going to get hooked up with the federal medical patient registry now because we're getting national federal legalization of cannabis, and that's just what the government wants. Mm-hmm. And so what'll suddenly happen in Washington is we'll get our concentrates back if we're willing to go down and sign on the dotted line that we're a cannabis patient, right? Therefore sabotaging ourselves if we're working in aerospace or working in, any other, as a forklift operator, as a longshoreman, as a union member, as a construction site employee, as a fucking, healthcare employee, right? There are many people who have already found the value of using concentrates in their life and their lifestyle, very therapeutic, but who for many very good and valid reasons don't want to categorize themselves as a patient in that way, right? They don't want the stigma, the label that comes along with it, and that is a real thing, in my opinion. So I feel like if a concentrates limitation bill passed, Josh, it would be because they were trying to, in a sense, transform the market, clear a lot of dead wood of low performing companies that would be hit in the short term by the short term initial drop off in at the counter transactions and sales of this category of product. And hang on, I do have a complete thought on that. Low performing companies take a hit. The state gets to have their cake and eat it too, because now they've put everything behind a medical wall, and everybody who doesn't want to sign on the dotted line has to now ask their buddy again to go into the store who does have a medical card and pick up their concentrates for them, their edibles for them, their tinctures, whatever it might be for them. And then you can criminalize both of those people for improperly providing cannabis to one another or receiving cannabis from a patient who was supposed to only procure it for themselves. You're caught out on the road on a normal traffic stop, and you've got concentrates that test in the 70s or 80s, and they say, okay, do you have your, medical card on you? And you're like, oh, well, no, I'm not actually a patient. That's my buddy's. He left it in the car or whatever, that people are getting criminalized then again, even in a legal area, right? So it's beautiful because you can, butter your bread on both sides as far as that goes, as far as I'm concerned, in a cynical kind of way.
Yeah, you're saying medical would still make it a crime because selling Xanax or whatever else is a crime versus selling gluten-free bread out of your trunk is not a crime. If it's a commodity, there's no crime.
Right. I'm saying if 80% of Washington's, countertop customers don't want to categorize themselves as medical patients and carry a certified, approved, medical recommendation, then 80% of Washington cannabis consumers could potentially be criminalized if at any point in time they're caught with legit concentrates on them.
That's an interesting point. So if GW Pharma's Epidiolex that just is, deemed by the FDA and DEA and everybody else that it's not a Schedule I narcotic. So if synthetics are not, then that's a derivative. So the
Mm-hmm.
THC and CBD byproducts shouldn't be Schedule 1 either. So decriminalize it, make it legal, or at least to your point, if GW Pharma is the gateway to medical, well, then that would just be pretty damning to the industry. I would blame you for that, because you just put that into the universe. That the medical side would still make it illegal, because you can't sell it, grow it, give it away, just like any other pharmaceutical.
I don't see it being taken away from us completely. I see it being controlled in obnoxious ways that basically put us in a position in the general public of either voluntarily, like I say, complying by labeling yourself a certain way and taking the consequences that go with that, or potentially just having to get it on the down low and always risk full-blown criminalization if caught. And that just strikes me as a particularly delectable paradigm to set up for, like, you know, like a less than altruistically motivated type of prevailing powers that be. You know, if we're calling it, I don't think it would just be law enforcement. I think it would be more like lawmakers than law enforcement. So
probably roll this one up, eh?
Yeah, I mean, I love talking to you. We could do this for a while, but I think I'm interested in keeping a watch on how things go in the stores, what starts running out. Mm-hmm. I don't know if producers and processors are just holding back a little bit, or if the retailers have just kind of hunkered down a little bit and they're like, okay, this is the perfect opportunity to go through all our old stock on the shelves slowly but surely, because everybody's just got to buy what we have on the online menu. And so we'll clear out a bunch of deadwood. Maybe that's where your 2-year-old cartridge came from. Right? Maybe we'll come to find out that retailer bought that a long time ago, but I bet it has a little bit of information on the packaging regarding harvest date and processing date. So
it didn't. It was very, very minimal.
There you go.
And a lot of that is, like, you got to be careful about the harvest date, because I bought a Cannagar down in Oregon. It was over a year old.
There you go.
And it wasn't discounted at all. Like, I probably would have bought it if it was discounted, but the fact that they're going to charge me 100% is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But we should definitely follow up with some numbers. Headset's got an interesting report on their blog, headset.io, a daily update on how the coronavirus is affecting the cannabis industry. So purchasing behavior, decisions, how much. So you can see that it goes up and down. So people are going out and maybe buying more than they normally would, but they're not coming back. So those numbers may end up leveling out, but, you know, we just got to wait and see.
Yep. No, it is. It's very interesting. I mean, the data is one of the biggest things that'll come out of this entire crisis. Is everyone is using data analytics to understand their industry. This is every single industry. This is digital creators, podcasters, right? Even podcasters and music artists and YouTube creators are probably seeing different watching and listening habits from people, because some folks are actually at home and able to use their time to catch up on shows that they haven't been, otherwise they would be working and wouldn't normally see. So I think watching the data as you do, I'm glad to see this from Headset. I think I saw an email from them about this, but I'll have to start paying attention to this digest now, this daily. So
or you just can come back to the Talking Hedge. And get
no,
all
for
your
sure.
Nerdy needs.
Already am, bro. So thank you for hanging out with me this morning and for smoking with me.
Yeah. So how can people get a hold of you? Where are you at?
You can always find me at bakedandawake.com. The podcast is simply Baked and Awake. All episodes also push to YouTube. And if you follow me on YouTube, that's kind of fun because I do videos in addition to normal podcast content. And YouTube's just fun because people can comment on stuff there, right? Podcasts are so one way. Otherwise, it feels like to me. So I really like that about YouTube. So wherever you look, Baked and Awake, you should find several results for me on the search engines. I use DuckDuckGo most of the time, not Google these days. So
state your name for the record.
Steve Cominski, aka Baked and Awake. Thanks, Josh.
That's it. I am Josh Kincaid. This is The Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out.